This is the story of one of the greatest rivers of Europe and the railways which share its 1,320-kilometer course to the North Sea. The story begins high in the inhospitable wastes of the rugged Swiss Alps. A small glacial lake, seemingly landlocked above the Oberalp Pass, is the source of one of the mightiest rivers, the Rhine, with a surface area of 250,000 square kilometers and providing drinking water for 30 million people, has its prime origin in this wasteland, which is snow and icebound for 6 months in every year. Although the Oberalp Pass road is open only in summer, the trains of the meter-gauge Furka Oberalp Railway parade through this stunning landscape all year round. Its greatest train is the renowned and aptly named Glacier Express, the slowest express train in the world, taking 8 hours for its 290-kilometer journey between Zermatt and St. Moritz. The locomotive is a brand new HGE 442 type, which can haul 150 tons over the 40% rack-assisted gradients of the mountainous line. The train comprises coaches of the 3 railways which operate the Glacier Express: the Furka Oberalp, Brig Visp Zermatt Railway, and the Rätische Bahn. In the monastic village of Disentis, the Furka Oberalp and the Rätischen Railway make an end-on connection. Locomotives are changed before the onward journey eastwards along the Rhine Valley. Unlike many narrow-gauge railways, the long train seems simply to be a scaled-down version of its standard-gauge counterpart. This is very much a mainline image, and it is by no means just a railway for tourists. Ilanz is known as the first town on the Rhine. The language spoken here is Romansh, an ancient tongue appropriate in a settlement with a history extending back well over 1,000 years. One of its churches was first recorded in the year 765. The Rhine is not a river to be trifled with. Occasionally, the exuberance of youth spills over into hostility. 1987 was such a year. The railway was torn and twisted like a child's toy as the river ran riot through the valley in one night of terror unlike any in living memory. In more normal times, the railway is respectful but not overawed by its travelling companion in the confines of a ravine gouged by the river after a cataclysmic landslip at the end of the last ice age. In the 90 kilometres from the river's source, the Rhine has become quite a large watercourse, swollen by many contributions from the mountainous side valleys. The crumbling mountain slopes have been eroded into a strange, forbidding landscape, and the railway takes what shelter it can in galleries and snowsheds. Mixed passenger and freight trains are very much a feature of the RHB. Mineral water, agricultural produce and cement form the bulk of the freight traffic. The chalet-style stations of Valendes-Sagogne and Versam-Safin lie deep in the gorge and are accessible only by train or steeply twisting dirt roads to the villages they serve. This route of the Rätische Bahn from Disentis to Chur follows the course of the Rhine, but the Rhine has another contributory, the Hinter Rhine, which rises as a spring in the mountains behind Thusis. The castle-strewn valley lies in a northerly direction from Thusis to the river's confluence at Reichenau. Here the two surging rivers unite to become a single mighty force. The lines from Disentis and St. Moritz via Thusis converge just before the distinctive iron bridge spanning the torrent. This glacier express has a 30-year-old GE66 articulated locomotive at its head. Massive iron bridges are a feature of railway crossings of the Rhine. This impressive span lies just to the west of Reichenau, and the tiny TM22 tractor locomotive is dwarfed by the giant structure. The narrow gauge Rätische Bahn and the standard gauge Swiss Federal Railway come together in the city of Chur, capital of Canton Graubünden. The city is the starting point for a train which follows the entire course of the Rhine from here to Amsterdam. The Eurocity Rembrandt takes 10.5 hours for its 1,000-kilometer run via Zurich, Basel, Mannheim, Mainz, Bonn, Cologne, Düsseldorf, Emmerich, Arnhem and Utrecht. The train leaves at 9:19 in the morning behind a red RE442 locomotive. Between Chur and Landquart, the narrow gauge and standard gauge rails run side by side. Landquart is the point where the Rätische Bahn diverges from the SBB and the Rhine towards the mountain resort of Davos. It is also the engineering headquarters of the railway and a focal point for the line's locomotives. Number 630 is one of the newest and most powerful. It's a GE442 type, weighing 50 tons and capable of 90 kilometers per hour. This GEM44 has a switchable source of power from overhead electricity to its own diesel engine. Another diesel engine is GM33 type, built by Moyes in 1976. GE24, number 213, is used for shunting around the station area. In contrast to the activity in Landquart, number 8487, in books a few kilometers away, evokes memories of a bygone era. She was built in 1909, and today she idles away the time contemplating the passage of more modern machines of the Austrian and Swiss Federal Railways. A 45-year-old Class 1020 crocodile locomotive of a type inherited by the Austrian Railways from the Deutsche Reichsbahn at the end of the Second World War retires to the servicing area after bringing in the Beograd to Zurich Express across the Arlberg Pass. The replacement locomotive is just a few years younger, an example of the AE66 class displaced from heavy duty on the Gotthard line with the arrival of more powerful locomotives in the 1970s. Those passengers who started their journey with the train deep in Yugoslavia have spent more than 20 hours in their seats, couchettes and sleeping cars. Shuttle services between Buchs and Feldkirch are provided by Austrian Railways electric rail cars, which rumble across the Rhine on a long iron bridge. This viewpoint is actually located in the Principality of Liechtenstein. The Arlberg Express, Franz Schubert, Maria Theresa, Alpenrhein, Wiener Walzer, Bodensee, and this, the Transalpin, all cross the Rhine and enter Austria at this point. In total contrast, if you take the motorway north from Buchs towards St. Margarethen, you might just be very lucky and spot a diminutive train meandering along the adjacent embankment. The locomotive looks like a hybrid diesel come electric, and its long train of swaying, jarring wagon loads of stone chunter along in its wake, protesting loudly. Bodensee, or Lake Constance, is the third largest lake in Central Europe, and it is fed and drained by the Rhine. On its southwestern shore is a secondary line of the Swiss Federal Railway, and here at Rorschach Harbour it is possible to see some of the older types of Swiss mainline locomotives, such as the AE47s, built between 1929 and 1934. Another fairly rare type of locomotive is the RE441 class, built around 1950. This one is on a stopping train from Romanshorn to Chur. The station is terminus for the RHB, not in this case the initials of the Rätische Bahn, but the Rorschach-Heidenbergbahn with its ancient rolling stock. On fine days, the train includes some archaic open passenger cars. The Swiss Federal Railways are not only responsible for trains around Lake Constance. SBB lake boat services connect Rorschach with Romanshorn, where the quay is so close to the station, it is, in effect, just another platform. The distinctive arrival and departure gongs, which used to be a feature of most Swiss stations, are still in use in Romanshorn. Trains of the National Railways and the Südostbahn both call at the station. Another Swiss railway whose territory extends to the shores of Lake Constance is the Mittel-Thurgau-Bahn, with an hourly service between Kreuzlingen at the head of the lake and Weinfelden. Although the coaching stock proclaims an individual corporate identity, Many of the locomotives are identical with types and color schemes found on the national network. Kreuzlingen is a minor entry point into Switzerland from Constance on the German border. Another, more important point of entry is Schaffhausen, with 9 trains a day connecting Zurich with Stuttgart. The town is dominated by Castel Munot, a 16th century fortification with walls more than 5 meters thick. The next railway crossing of the Rhine is at the famous Rhine Falls. These are the greatest falls in Central Europe. The river surges over a ledge of Jurassic limestone 150 meters across and 21 meters high. 2 prominent rocks divide the waterfall, and normally visitors can be taken to them for a dramatic view. But the river is now in flood, and the small boat is not powerful enough to compete with the flow of water. The authorities are also having great difficulties in controlling the raging torrent. The sluice gates are adjusted to minimize flooding around Lake Constance without inundating the lower reaches of the river through Germany. Away from the river at Rheinfelden, the pace is a little slower. The beautifully restored coaches of the Feldschlösschen brewery rest peacefully for the next influx of visitors. Although this is a Thursday and no visitors are expected, a tiny steam locomotive emerges from the castle-like complex which gives the beer its name. The minute 040 locomotive is one of the few remaining steam locomotives in Europe still regularly working for a living. She was built by Krauss in Munich in 1907. And although she's only 8 meters long and tips the scales at a mere 26.5 tons, she still copes effortlessly with heavy wagons on the steep incline to the factory. The Cardinal Brewery in Rheinfelden also maintains a sense of history, but their working locomotive is much more modern. There is activity on the German side of the Rhine, of course, although the line from Basel through Waldshut to Schaffhausen is very much a secondary route. Most services are in the hands of Class 218 diesels, with driving facilities in the rear trailer allowing push-pull working. Although not a railway bridge, this is the longest covered wooden bridge in Europe and connects the town of Bad Säckingen with Switzerland. The next railway bridge along the Rhine is in the heart of one of Switzerland's major cities, Basel. This is the main international route between Switzerland and Germany for both passenger and freight traffic. Basel, 733 kilometers from the sea, is the effective limit of navigation for cargo boats, and the harbour handles 9 million tons of merchandise a year. A futuristic symbol marks the point at which the 3 countries of Germany, France and Switzerland unite. Railway shunting is undertaken by large BM44 locomotives, which are usually fully occupied. But for the last 2 weeks, the port has been virtually landlocked as a result of a disaster 200 kilometers downstream at Karlsruhe. In midsummer 1987, navigation became extremely hazardous on the storm-swollen waterway. and two barges collided with the railway bridge just south of Karlsruhe. The sunken ships blocked the river for large cargo transport for over a month. Salvage was a difficult, painstaking process which involved the dissection of the motor vessel Orinoco. Her twisted hull is testimony to the awesome power of the river. Railway traffic was not affected, and the old diesel rail buses of the Deutsche Bundesbahn maintained services between Karlsruhe and Wörth without interruption. On the German side of the river, north of Basel, around the edge of the Black Forest, the railway is quite steeply graded as far as Mannheim. Local services are still of a push-pull variety, but there are many interesting trains on this international artery, such as this one, hauled by a Class 110 locomotive. The long-distance expresses, such as the Rheinfile from Chur to Hanover, are most often hauled by the new Class 103 locomotives. There are some familiar locomotive shapes on the French side of the Rhine between Strasbourg, Mulhouse and Basel. The BB-class locomotives can handle freight and express trains to a maximum speed of 180 kilometers per hour. This is a late-running Italia Express from Rimini to Brussels. Diesel railcar sets provide fast regional services on this line. The 13,000 class were built in the late 40s, and they are now being phased out of service. The river is a magnet for heavy industry, and the rather inaptly named Rhône-Poulenc Company on the French west bank of the Rhine at Chalampé employs two small industrial locomotives. The French Renault factory and distribution centre at Markelsheim is also served by rail. North of Strasbourg, on the French side, the Rhine route carries only regional traffic, such as these Région d'Alsace diesel push-pull services. The French-German border is only a short distance to the north, and the main activity is concentrated on the east bank of the Rhine. This is the intercity Rheinblitz from Baselbad to Hanover. There is a great deal of heavy freight traffic on this four-track main line. When maintenance work is necessary, the overhead electricity supply is isolated, and the workmen take to the rails with their own form of transport. Eventually, they return with a more conventional train propelled by a Class 260 diesel. Official distances along the Rhine are measured in kilometers from Constance. The next railway crossing is at kilometre post 384 near Germersheim, but it only carries a little-used branch line. Speyer Cathedral is perhaps the first significant landmark along the Rhine in Germany. It was built in 1030 by Kaiser Conrad II in a commanding position above the river. Mannheim marks the beginning of Germany's industrial heartland. Freight facilities extend over many square kilometers to the south of the city, and the Hauptbahnhof is a colorful crossroads for the city's trams and for trains from all over Germany and beyond. This 1974 Class 181 locomotive, built for cross-border working into France and Luxembourg, is hauling the Eurocity Goethe from Paris Est to Frankfurt. And this is the southbound Lochberg from Hanover to Brig. The Eurocity trains, a name introduced in 1987 to replace the Trans-Europe Express designation, are supplemented by Fern Express, or long-distance trains, with a destination or origin in a city close to the German border. The Bodensee from Münster to Constance falls into this category. Fast internal services are still designated intercity expresses. To the north of Mannheim, the twisting course of the Rhine is free of railway company for many kilometers, with the exception of this bridge, which carries a secondary route across the river near Worms. The local passenger services are hauled by small diesels or provided by modern rail buses. On the river itself, travelers and holidaymakers are well looked after in luxury river cruise liners, some of which ply the whole length of the river from the North Sea to the limit of navigation at Basel. The motor ship Austria is 104 meters long and 9.3 meters wide, and she has beds for 102 passengers. The railway and the Rhine come together again in wine country, south of Mainz. This is the land of Liebfraumilch and Riesling, with many familiar names amongst the producers. Guntersblumer, Dienheimer, Oppenheimer, Bodenheimer and Niersteiner are perhaps the most well known. The important city of Mainz lies at the point where the Rhine undergoes a temporary change from the industrial to the romantic. Even the railway bridges take on a medieval appearance, with castellated abutments and portals. For the next 190 kilometers to Germany's capital city, Bonn, there is a railway on both banks of the river, although the constant summer haze does not always render them perfectly visible. The river is much calmer now, and the flow of water, although still fast, has eased considerably. In the 498 kilometers from Constance, the river has fallen 318 meters in height. The remaining distance to the sea is about the same, but the Rhine only has to descend a further 82 meters. The river has taken a temporary westward direction. The railway on the northern bank through Rudesheim carries mainly local and regional stopping services, together with heavy freight traffic, whilst the intercity and Eurocity express trains are confined to the south bank. This is the Eurocity Lochberg, making an unscheduled stop in Bingen. The river turns north again at Bingerbrook. This is a major railway junction between the Frankfurt-Cologne line through Mainz and the lines from the south through Kaiserlautern and Saarbrücken. In the mist on the far river bank is the ruined castle of Ehrenfels. Although the letters TEE no longer feature in German railway timetables, an elderly 10-car gas turbine Trans-Europe Express set still sees service along the Rhine. The gas turbine TEE units were introduced in 1954, and all but this one in charter service have been scrapped. It's always interesting to compare various competing forms of transport, and with a constant procession of cargo boats and freight trains, there is no shortage of opportunity. This, it must not be forgotten, is the romantic Rhine. And perhaps the most romantic sight of all is the beautiful castle of Pfalzgrafenstein. It's set on a small island in mid-river, although the island has temporarily disappeared under the abnormally high water. It was built by King Ludwig of Bavaria in 1326 to extract tolls from passing merchant ships. The best view is from the small vehicle ferry which crosses the river to the village of Kaub in front of the castle. This train, about to pass behind the castle, is the privately owned Touristic Union International Holiday Express, introduced in 1980. This stretch of the Rhine is littered with castles and ruins. Starleck Castle was built in 1135, and the castle known as Katz was completed in 1370 by Graf Johann III. There is a constant procession of freight trains on the east bank of the Rhine, hauled by older examples of DB's locomotive power. As the dawn heralds a new day, the cruise boats weigh anchor and set sail. If they're so inclined to cast an eye ashore, there is continual railway entertainment for the voyagers. The castle of Schönberg stands high above the village of Oberwessel, where the trains seem to pick their way through a profusion of medieval architecture. Ornate architecture is evident everywhere, but the trains which emerge are not always predictable. The steep hills bordering the Rhine posed many problems for the engineers who built the railways on either side of the river. Although it is a level route, many embankments and tunnels were required to thread the tracks through the valley. One of the largest ruined castles in the valley is Rheinfels, which was built in 1242 and destroyed by the French in 1797. The 14th century castle of Marksburg, which is now a museum, stands high above the river on the east bank. Castle ramparts can sometimes provide an excellent platform to view rail and river traffic. One of the most modern locomotive types on German rails is the Class 103 Express locomotive, introduced in the early 1970s. With a top speed of 280 kilometers per hour, they handle nearly all Germany's fast express trains. The Lufthansa Airport Express is used to transfer airline passengers between Düsseldorf and Frankfurt airports. It has a non-stop schedule, which does not appear in the official timetables. The unit was built in 1973. Germany's capital city, Bonn, lies at the northern end of the romantic section of the Rhine. It has a population only half the size of Düsseldorf and a quarter the size of Cologne. It also has a tiny main railway station with just 3 platform faces. Trains are dispatched in quick succession and platform occupation is kept to a minimum. With more than half her journey between Chur and Amsterdam completed, the Rembrandt departs on time from platform 1. Bonn is located at the edge of a massive conurbation, which stretches to Duisburg 120 kilometers to the north. But throughout this urban amalgam of cities, industrial areas and residential developments, the Rhine maintains its stunning beauty. The silhouette of Cologne Cathedral is visible from the arches of one of the most spectacular railway bridges over the Rhine. This is the Bayental Bridge, which enables trains to avoid the congested center of the city, a sort of railway bypass. Consequently, it carries an enormous quantity of freight, with trains crossing the bridge in both directions every few minutes. There are many light engine movements and the occasional long-distance express train, such as the Frankfurt to Ostend and London sleeping car and motorrail service. Trains of the Cologne Interurban Light Railway run under the western end of the bridge. Needless to say, a slow river cruise is the most relaxing way of watching the trains go by. Certainly the widest railway bridge across the Rhine is the gigantic span which carries 6 tracks to the very throat of Cologne's main railway station. The old town clusters around the Cathedral of St. Peter and Marianne, which took from 1242 until 1880 to complete. The station nestles in the shadow of the cathedral's north wall, and train passengers are given an excellent view of the city and the river. The bridge is guarded by 2 mounted figures, as befits the entrance to such a great city. They overlook the comings and goings of a great variety of trains, from those of the humble commuter network to full international expresses with destinations all over Europe. It's not at all uncommon to see locomotives and trains belonging to the Belgian railways, which connect Ostend and Brussels with Cologne, Dortmund and Hanover. Germany has been a great proponent of the Citybahn concept, which was started in this city in 1984. These services connect Cologne with neighboring cities, utilizing comfortable trains hauled and propelled by specially modified Class 218 diesel locomotives. The S-Bahn services are suburban trains with frequent stops and fast acceleration to maintain good average speeds in densely populated areas. These are also push-pull trains, but they are confined to areas with overhead power supply for the smartly painted Class 111 locomotives. The kilometer post proclaims this point to be 738 kilometers from Constance, which places it 261 kilometers from the sea. A new concrete and steel structure bridges the gap between Neuss and Düsseldorf. Yesterday was the 2nd of July 1987, the very first day for regular services over the new span. Overnight, heavy lifting gear and barges were floated into position, and the demolition of the old bridge alongside began. Early in the morning, the steelworkers began to slice the top from one of the gigantic arches. Slowly, imperceptibly, the top was lowered onto a waiting barge as the river police kept cargo boats and waterborne sightseers well clear. Two railways head northwestwards from Germany's Rhineland conurbations towards the Dutch border. The lesser of the two arrives at the small frontier village of Kranenburg. There is nothing much here except the border post, but 6 times a day a diesel haul train arrives at the station. Judging from the size of the station and the extensive wheat-choked sidings, it must at one time have witnessed a greater density of traffic. Locomotives are not exchanged here, and following a short pause for the few passengers to undergo customs formalities and to detach 2 coaches from the rear of the train, the Class 215 diesel is on its way to Nijmegen in Holland once more. The main route to Holland is north of the Rhine through Emmerich. The landscape is now extremely flat and lies just 19 meters above sea level. Although the actual border is 19 kilometers away, locomotives are exchanged in Emmerich and customs examinations are undertaken in the station area. At 6:22 in the evening, the Eurocity Rembrandt from Chur arrives. She is one of 3 Eurocity trains to use this route daily. The others are the Franz Hals from Munich to Amsterdam and the Erasmus from Innsbruck to Amsterdam. The Class 103 locomotive and the first coach are detached from the train to be replaced by a massive locomotive of the Dutch railways. To European eyes, the locomotive has an unusual profile. In fact, she was built in America by the American Locomotive Company ALCO in 1951. There are 25 of these locomotives in the Netherlands. They weigh 108 tons and have a maximum speed of 135 kilometers per hour. 10 minutes after the train's arrival, the twin pantographs are raised and the train is underway again. Following the Rembrandt's departure, a tiny Class 333 diesel shunter sets about assembling the next southbound regional train. A Class 1600 locomotive, built for the Dutch railways in France, is the replacement for the subsequent northbound train which awaits the arrival of the southbound Holland-Vienna Express, which is hauled by the same class of locomotive. Delivery of the 1600 class began in 1981. There are no gradients of any consequence in Holland, so a relatively light locomotive such as this can haul 600-ton express trains at 140 kilometers an hour and 2,400-ton freight trains at 80 kilometers per hour. Electric rail cars are utilized for many fast internal Dutch services. The Class 64 type can travel at 120 kilometers per hour, which it can reach from rest in only 100 seconds. At Arnhem Station on a Sunday morning, the skies above seem rather crowded. It's a little before midday, and a Class 2400 diesel-electric locomotive built by the French company Alstom in the mid-50s waits for tomorrow's freight traffic. A dog-nose Type 54 class electric railcar set dating from 1960 leaves for Utrecht. These were the predecessor of the Class 64, which first came into service in 1964 and were still being built as late as 1976. Amongst the older types of Dutch passenger trains is the DE1 type of diesel-electric rail cars, built in 1953. They have a top speed of 100 kilometers an hour, and they acquired the nickname Blue Angel when they were first brought into service. In charge of today's Frans Hals from Amsterdam to Munich is another example of the 1600 class of locomotive. Utrecht is a major railway junction between north-south and east-west routes in Holland. Rather reminiscent of the Japanese Tokaido high-speed train is the Martinair Holland Express. This is a privately owned train and conveys airline passengers between Amsterdam and other airports around the country. Lights at the end of the platforms announce the impending arrival and departure of trains. In this instance, a Dutch Railways Intercity 3 unit has combined with the Martinair train to travel to Enschede on the German border. The IC3 sets were built in 1977 to a futuristic design, and their top speed is 160 kilometers per hour. The name Holland conjures up an image of vast flatlands studded with windmills and dissected by canals. The image is not too far from the truth between Utrecht and Amsterdam. On the outskirts of Amsterdam, an artificial lake close to the railway line is a paradise for pleasure seekers. But whatever the alternative attractions, the constant procession of trains cannot be ignored. The unusual clarity of light in this part of Holland is an inspiration for photographers, and the shimmering lake reflecting a perfect blue sky is a delightful setting for the trains. Amsterdam, the capital city of the Netherlands, is a cosmopolitan metropolis of 700,000 people. Its link with the Rhine is a wide canal which joins the river just south of Utrecht. Another connection, of course, is the Rembrandt. This flagship of the Eurocity International Network arrives in Amsterdam at 1 minute before 8 o'clock. It has been possible for her passengers to travel almost the entire length of the River Rhine in one superb train. Those who first travelled with the Furka-Oberalp Railway over the Oberalp Pass to Chur have followed the entire 1,320-kilometre course of the Great River. Amsterdam Central Station, like that of any capital city, is the best place to examine the diversity of locomotives and rolling stock. The modern-looking 1300 class of locomotives were in fact built over 30 years ago in France. Although the theoretical top speed is 135 kilometers per hour, one locomotive of this type achieved a world record 331 kilometers per hour in 1955. The generous loading gauge allows the use of double-deck coaching stock, which towers above the 1600 class locomotives. These trains are assembled in a push-pull formation for commuter services around the city. The latest development of electric railcar sets is the Sprinter type. A smart new push-pull train was introduced in 1986 for fast connections between Amsterdam and Brussels. It's a joint Dutch-Belgian project known as the Benelux train. The coaches have been provided by the Dutch railways and the locomotives are Belgian. The Hook of Holland is the Rhine's natural outlet into the North Sea. We are now just over 1,000 kilometers from Constance and 1,320 kilometers from the river's prime source in the Swiss Alps. Many international trains begin and end their journeys here, and it's possible to see rolling stock from all over Europe, including Scandinavia, Eastern Bloc countries including Poland and East Germany. There are also through coaches to Moscow from the Hook of Holland. International trains are timed to leave in flights, following the arrival of ferry services, and incoming services are timed to arrive well in advance of boat departures. The Rhine is one of the world's major waterways. It's a fundamental element in the trading and tourist economies of the countries which it borders and passes through. Inevitably, river and rail are both part of an integrated transport network, and the river artery is shared for many hundreds of kilometers by railways along the river banks. As a natural barrier, its presence has forced railway engineers to seek interesting and sometimes spectacular solutions to the problems of getting from one side to another. There can be few journeys of 1,300 kilometers where complete trains from 7 countries can be seen, and passenger rolling stock from 7 more. Why not follow in our footsteps and see for yourself the railways of the Rhine?